Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host Chris. In between a ton of conferences, he never stops. He's always going. McNulty.
I appreciate the intro, but we could say the same about you.
True. Up until this point, we've been kind of back to back. You are continuing the pace, and we'll get to that in the events, but I know you're in the in-between a little bit more than me right now.
Right. But to keep you in the loop, see what I did there?
Oh, nice.
Keep all of you in the loop. Today we're going to be sitting down with Greg Howard, who's principal product manager who works on Loop and Fluid Framework as part of the Office Experience organization.
That is right. We're going to get all loopy with Greg and talk about what Microsoft Loop is, what's shipped so far, those awesome real-time Fluid components, and how things relate, because we know our audience, to OneDrive from a storage perspective. And we squeezed a little bit of what's coming next from Greg. So we want to talk about basically this thing, Microsoft Loop. I want to get your perspective because I really like the new name. And I really like where it's evolved from. But Chris, through your own unique perspective, because you've been through some naming recently with syntax and topics, what do you think of the name Loop?
I love the name. I mean, it's something that's simple and clean, that is an active word. It allows us to describe the product. And, you know, when you go through these naming things, there's a time in Microsoft history where what we're calling Loop, we might have called Microsoft Collaborative Component Management System for Enterprise 3.0, and which leads to acronyms, and it's fine. In the end, the name of a product doesn't fundamentally change what it does, but it does change your perspective of it. And I think Loop is a friendly word. It's a verb. And so when you pick names like this, and the naming teams at Microsoft do look for things where you could see the potential down the road of saying, oh, hey, can you loop the agenda for us? And things like that just make it easier for it to get into the everyday conversation. And if it's an everyday conversation, it's just one step easier to getting good adoption. So I love the name too.
I like it. I mean, everything that we've sort of even just been joking about with using it, keep you in the loop, getting loopy. There's, I think, maybe more to come when we talk to Greg, but it really does infer people getting connected and seeing things for as they are right now, staying in the loop. But I think what I don't want to, call the internal process being a headache, but just getting through naming. And I know sometimes your joke right at the top there was the reality of sometimes we don't land on a great name. But the two that I mentioned that you own, and now with Loop, I think we're seeing a better track record for things that land what they are memorable, and just are good brand names.
And I know that we have a broad range of customers, but when we think about the agricultural industry, the fact that we may be helping them create Fruit Loops is just...
And now I want a bowl of cereal. Pause for 10 minutes while we get some cereal and milk. So the other thing I wanted to get your perspective on, Chris, because from your true perspective, a lot of what you focus on is this thing we call content services of Microsoft 365. With Loop, it gets it down to even more of a smaller, granular level of a component, to use their word. But let's talk about before Loop, just to talk about then where does Loop land in this notion of a document or a content type or something that people work with. But how would you have qualified the smaller components before Loop in the context of people working and collaborating together?
Well, the ways that we would have done it before Loop are with small documents. Rather than and we still create these massive multi-slide PowerPoints, these multi-tabbed Excel sheets, these multi-page Word documents. If you take it back a little more than 10 years ago, what you would do is you would take a small doc, you'd send it around to people. They would all edit copies independently, and then you'd try to harmonize all their edits just to get to the agenda for a meeting. Or say one person would be the keeper of the document, and please send all your changes to that person. And that's okay. And what we've seen rise over the past 10 years, as we've standardized on cloud technologies, it's sort of important to remember when you were on premises, it's hard to get a dynamic group access to the same thing. And so what we saw emerge as a pattern is, whether it's in email or in chat, posting links to one common document. And that's sort of a step up. Like it makes sure that with things like co-authoring, everyone can edit the same version of things. But you still have the fact that people have to go through their different collaboration channels all to get back to the same thing. It is one degree of separation from where the content lives. And frequently what we care about isn't really the Word doc for the agenda. It's the facts that go into that, whether it's an agenda or a voting table or all of the different elements that we've started to frame out inside Loop. We just want to create that component and make it so that if I have that component embedded, whether it's in a Word doc or inside of an email or inside of a chat, everyone can edit without having to click through and go to someplace else. And that makes the collaboration happen in the surface where you also receive notice that there's something to collaborate on. So regardless of whether you're on your email or you're looking at, the title slide in PowerPoint deck, when you make an edit there, that is the edit. And when other people have changes, they all go to the same place. And so that whole idea of a component architecture, which the idea of component architecture is really not new. If you think back to, what was referred to as COM and DCOM and all these embedded ActiveX objects 20 years ago, there were still approaches to the same need, but they were fairly heavy approaches. Like, how do I embed a full Excel table inside a PowerPoint, which is, clunky, and there's huge memory requirements on the client side, which makes it inappropriate for things like phones and tablets and so forth. And so by taking it down below the file level to that paragraph, to that table, to that agenda, to that list, lowercase l, one of the clear mark, I think it just really opens up much more flexibility in how people can engage that.
Yeah, alongside the flexibility, two things that always have resonated with me, seeing how they've launched Loop and the notion of where it's been built out of, this fluid framework, is the ability to narrow people's attention. If I send somebody the whole document and I'm not discreet about adding a comment that calls their attention to a specific paragraph or a specific table or a graphic, this really gives me the ability to narrow the focus. And in one work stream, one thing I'm excited about is in the context of a blog, if it's going to be a disclosure blog, there's often the top two paragraphs that my leadership team, including, some of your own, folks that we work with that give sign off or give their final say, does this look good? Is it need a little work? And with the PR team, who really does just look at how are we disclosing it? There's also the people that we work with that own the technology. Did I phrase it right? Did I say this feature works? And if there's anything that we need to call out to be specific that's technically accurate. And that's typically a little bit below the fold, along with, nice images that the design team wants to look at. And I think it just gives the ability to, beyond an obvious comment in a document, to actually say, here is the thing I'd like you to look at, and have it be something that I can paste into a chat or ask them, to work with discreetly in the document. The other outcome alongside flexibility and narrowing the focus is minimizing error or minimizing versions, if that's one way to phrase it, where this thing that I pasted in a chat or have in a Word document or sent as an email, a lot of different surface area for where to engage, is affecting the same thing. So where I'm looking and where I've sent people to look, we're looking at the same thing no matter where they come across it. So it really minimizes error and increases getting that time to market as far as the final outcome.
With what you're just explaining, it's a pattern that makes collaboration more dynamic. It doesn't mean that it's universally applicable. So there are certain things that need to be static and frozen. I'm going to ask you about some of your recent conference experiences here in just a minute. But if you think about when you're doing a presentation, there's an agenda, and you sit down and you actually are presenting it at a formal meeting, regardless of all the drafting that went into it. The agenda is what it is. And going back and the fact that I can dynamically co-author the agenda from an email 4 weeks later isn't necessarily the result you always want either, that certain things need to be static. And so it's appropriate to choose the right pattern based on what you're doing. But we're talking around loop, which is okay. It's usually a circular construct, but let's get right into the center of the loop. So at the Microsoft 365 conference last week, you participated in an on-stage demonstration of loop. Could you talk a little bit about what that was and what you did?
Yeah, it was my favorite moment of being on stage without being on stage. So we had the conference down in Las Vegas, Microsoft 365 conference, and our corporate vice president, Jeff Teeper, had an opening keynote of which he co-presented with a number of people. One of them, our colleagues, Stephen Rose from the Teams team. And I got to use Loop or be in the loop with Stephen during his demo, during the Teams portion of the presentation. He put up, like you just mentioned, an agenda that he and I then worked on in real time while he was on stage and I was back, in the green room, essentially. And we were covering this in the concept of conversations. So Stephen talked about Loop within the content of components that he shared, and he collaborated with me through a Teams chat, just a one-on-one chat, being his demo buddy behind the scenes. When he started that chat, he started it as an agenda, and he added one item. And then I got busy with adding my additional items that to the audience just looked like they appeared. You could see my image appear where I was typing. He could type additional things. I was having some fun, just typing in some silly things, but really contributing to that agenda as it grew. And if we added an additional person to that chat, they could just as well add to the agenda. So on stage, he was doing it from his laptop. Me behind the scenes, I was on my mobile device, and we were working together in a one-on-one chat. I think to your point, not necessarily part of our demo, but I think there is that importance of at what point do we want to lock this down and call it final? That I think is something that's interesting in how you do that, because a lot of it is lifting it out of the context where you're collaborating and moving it into something that might be a final agenda slide that you start with at the head of a presentation, or that final paragraph, locking it in and marking it as something that has been viewed and approved and now no longer should be quite as fluid. But it was really fun, and it's a really easy to demo to do. And you're going to hear it from Greg, but we'll encourage it as well. These are available today if you're using Microsoft Teams. In a one-on-one chat, look for the loop icon. It literally looks like a loop with a little kind of squished bottom left corner. And it opens up this world of seeing a bunch of loop components that you can try, lists and tables and paragraphs and a lot more coming. So very fun to do as a demo. Used it some real time internally as well since we've launched it. But beyond Chris and I getting all loopy and feeling like we're in the loop with each other and now with you, let us turn and talk with Greg from our product management team, to get behind the scenes, to get behind the tech, to get in the loop with Loop. So enough of Chris and I yabbering on about something that we kind of know a little bit about. We want to get to know a lot about Microsoft Loop. So we have here with us today Greg Howard, who is a principal product manager working on all things Microsoft Loop, or he's going to tell us what he's working on. Welcome into the Loop, Greg, to the Interzone. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. Pleasure to join you today.
So, Greg, it would be great for our audience to get a little bit of insight as to who you are, what you do here at Microsoft, how you joined our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Microsoft, almost 15 years now. My expertise is in human-centered design and scenario-focused engineering. I've got a lot of history at the company working on the hardware and software that keeps us productive. In the past, I focused that mainly on how to stay productive when we're on the go. I've done a lot of work on mobile hardware. I had a hand in the Surface Duo product, in Surface Hub, other pieces of Surface hardware. I've thought a lot about the Office experience and how we make use of those products to stay productive. But when COVID hit back in March 2020, it really changed everything about how I do my work. And so I was excited to pivot a little bit and help find those new ways that Office can meet this challenge. I joined the team working on Loop just after the start of the pandemic because I saw that, like I think many folks in your audience, we're really struggling with the challenge of including everyone and keeping a large geo-distributed team in sync. And Microsoft Loop is all about meeting that challenge. And so I'm excited to lead our product work for Microsoft Loop experiences in Teams and Whiteboard.
That is quite a journey going from, I'm just saying, the days of Windows Phone into Surface, and obviously what you said, more hardware. Loop is very much back-end service and enabling of front-end and lots of user interfaces. So before we get into kind of some of the details, just so that everybody's super clear on what Microsoft Loop is, can we hear it from your perspective and obviously how you would describe Microsoft Loop?
Loop it's really a whole new way to work together. It lets you think, plan, and create together with your team like you've never been able to before. A way of composing content and comments, chats, reactions, live business process data all together in a new collaborative canvas, one that's well suited for a world that's increasingly communications first and even AI first. So Loop consists of three core elements. It's Loop workspaces, Loop pages, and Loop components. Now, workspaces are these shared spaces that allow you and your team to see and group everything important to your project together in one place as a central source of truth. You can add Office docs, notebooks, files, links, whiteboards, meeting notes, anything that might be related to your project. Now, the pages are flexible canvases within workspaces that grow to match the size of your ideas. They put the focus on your work and bring together powerful tools that adapt to meet the needs of your project. So pages feature these Loop components, the atomic building blocks, atomic units of productivity that allow the team to pull in live business records, track tasks, and capture progress. But it's not just about content, it's also about connecting with people. Loop is all about keeping you and your team always in sync. You have a space to brainstorm, create, build on each other's work, and you can react to each other's ideas and express your thoughts, and then celebrate achievements together. It's a way to have everything in one place, and the best part about it, in my opinion, is how Loop components give you the necessary tools to collaborate seamlessly and effectively inside a conversation in the places where you're already doing your work. So you can bring part of that workspace into Teams, into Outlook and your emails, into whatever app your team is comfortable with and is using in that moment. So that's the overall vision, and it's that first part of it that's available for you to try today. The ability to take the work that you're doing in Teams and create a Loop component right there, in line, embedded, with this live interactive canvas that's in the flow of your work and where you and your colleagues are already getting things done.
I love that what you said there about grow to meet the scope of your ideas.
Yeah, you can start with something small, you're pulling together ideas, brainstorming, and then it scales up as you work with your coworkers and find the things that resonate most. It's a way of making that a truly collaborative process in contrast maybe to the world many of us are used to, where we start in a Word or Excel or PowerPoint document and work isolated for a little while and then share it out.
As work grows, and as expectations of how people work together, a lot of the impetus was that things changed. And it may be, in this point in time with the pandemic, there's a lot of new expectations with hybrid work. There's also just the expectations of how now people work together in different time spans, different time zones, cross geos, and all of that. Can you give the Microsoft lens of why is this exciting for us to deliver this type of capability to our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we heard a bunch about this back at Microsoft's Ignite conference in November. We're really living through, I would say, a pivotal moment, a once-in-a-generation shift in the way that we work. Now, that was brought on by the pandemic, of course, but as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic, we're clearly shifting into a new world of hybrid work, where organizations have to adapt. They need to find the right solutions to keep folks connected and collaborating, regardless of where they work and how they work, and make that flexible work, a real part of how their teams and organizations succeed. I know there was a lot of great data on this that Microsoft has shared. It published a work trend index with findings from a study of more than 30,000 people in 31 countries. And there's what Satya has called a hybrid paradox, in that we know that on one end, employees want these more flexible remote work options, but at the same time, they also want more in-person collaboration. So teams are struggling to find ways of streamlining their communication and their collaboration. It means a lot of them are relying more on impromptu calls and ad hoc meetings to get work done. It's actually 62% of those calls and meetings. And it's happening in an environment where, the volume of communication just continues to grow. Meeting times are doubling. The number of emails has grown by 40 billion year over year. And yet at the same time, like, this transition to hybrid work makes it so much harder to form the strong working relationships that are necessary to build on each other's ideas, make decisions, and solve problems together. It's all too easy for folks with different work styles and working hours to be left behind when a conversation is moving quickly. But we know that teams can't reach their full potential if decisions are mostly shaped by those who are quickest to respond on an email or chat thread.
You're talking about the Work Trend Index. One thing in the latest edition of the Work Trend Index that we published is really talking about some contending forces that are going on with, the numbers of people who during, what's been called the Great Reshuffle, nearly 20% of the people we reached in this year's survey have left their jobs in the past year. And 52% of millennials and Gen Z are thinking about it. So the pressure is, one of the things that we've seen is that the pressure is really on the employer to make it worth it. Like, employees are looking to renegotiate the deal, if you will. And that's extending to all aspects of the workplace. Some of it's physical. Like, if you want me to come back into the office, give me a good reason to do it. And some of it is truly digital. Like, are you investing in the experiences and relationships that I need to make it worth my while to continue to contribute to this organization? Which is why I have to tell you, like, the previews I've delivered of Loop to customers, there's just so much excitement about something new. And this is going to help. It's almost fun or delightful to vote on agenda items. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly how we think about it. We're trying to introduce into this unique moment in the landscape of productivity a new way to bring folks together even when they're apart. It's something that allows teams to be in sync and easily connect with everyone that they need to. A tool that keeps everything teams need to complete their projects, whether that's thoughts and apps and files and people. It puts it all into one place. We really want to tackle this challenge because it's a huge part of how we continue to make work not only productive, but also fun, recognizing that people are going to more and more work when and how they choose to meet their work-life balance needs, meet their family needs, and exist in a world where their team members may be scattered across the globe.
One of the things we like to accomplish on this podcast is to give everybody that little insight, of the world that you live in and make these things work. There's obviously the business critical, which you were just describing, of how to bring people together, but also to work at their own pace, at their own time, and maybe even through a number of different entry points. There's also the interest, from people that we hear from, a lot of people that have been with OneDrive and SharePoint for a long time, just to give them a little sense of how this works behind the scenes, maybe to share the connection of Microsoft Loop to OneDrive, SharePoint, and the broader Microsoft 365 content platform. How would you, make sure that people were just aware of what's going on, but also, I think, to a lot of our IT pro and IT admins out there, the benefits as well?
We've talked a little bit about how Loop and Loop components specifically offer this, hopefully a better way to bring everyone together and empower that free flow of ideas without leaving anyone out. Folks are used to working within files like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint to get that work done. And, something that really lights it up for folks, especially when we're talking to IT pros and admins, is because every Loop component that you create in an app like Teams or Outlook, every component is backed by a file in your OneDrive for Business. And so because components are actually backed by files, you automatically get all of the advantages of the OneDrive ecosystem. You have a full version history, which easily lets you recover content that was removed from a component if you need to revisit an idea. All of our usual retention policies apply. So, even though these files are going into OneDrive for Business, just like attachments that you'd put in Teams, if somebody leaves the company, you also have all the tools that OneDrive and SharePoint give you to manage that. that. Now, in the future, we're going to be adding Loop to other shared environments like team channels, and those have their own storage. So some Loop components and pages will start in SharePoint instead. We've heard from our IT admins how important it is to tenant administrators that we've talked to over the past year. Folks love to consolidate this information into SharePoint when possible. But when it's me collaborating with, say, you, Mark, and Chris, if I share a Loop component with you, the fact that it's actually a file on OneDrive for Business gives access to this whole ecosystem of amazing capabilities. It works with data governance features like retention policies, e-discovery, auditing, reporting, legal hold. These components show up on your office.com homepage. You can find them through search. And so the hope is that it's really comfortable to work with these components, which again unlock an entirely new way of working together in the communication streams where you're already talking to your colleagues. But there's also a lot that's familiar about them as well, and they should be really easy to manage. And we're hoping to hear more from our customers and our users about how that's working in the real world.
I'm going to pretend I've never used the technology and ask the newbie question. So, in addition to being able to post an Excel file through Teams, which lives in SharePoint in the back end, and then send links around saying, hey, everyone contribute your ideas to Excel, we've got a new way of just taking that common component and exposing it not just in one place, but ultimately to multiple endpoints where people can participate and see that.
Yeah, I'd say it's all part of a broader story of wanting there to be a single source of truth that everyone can work against. I think we all remember the bad old days of emailing attachments around version 1, version 2, version 3, final, etc. And, there are, of course, ways to put your files into the cloud today, and to use the co-authoring and collaboration tools built into the Microsoft 365 suite in apps like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint to do your work together. This is very much building on that foundation, not technically, since we're based on the Fluid framework, our open source infrastructure for enabling extremely low latency experiences that feel instantaneous. But we're building on it philosophically in the sense that everything that you're doing with your colleagues is live and up to date in the cloud. And the way that we're taking that even further is unlike Word, Excel, and PowerPoint files where you might share a link around and then you can open that either in your browser or in one of our client experiences and collaborate there. We're taking that collaboration right into the heart of your communication. So these components, we call it hydrate, or they embed themselves in line so that you don't even need to leave the context of your Teams and Outlook experience. You can edit it right there. And what we found as we talked to customers and to our colleagues is that it's so much more inviting to be able to just plop your cursor right into this Loop component embedded into an email or to a Teams chat. There's no barrier to entry to share your ideas. Everyone gets to participate in a way that's very open and collaborative. And like you said, Chris, like a major part of this promise is that these components then become portable to wherever you need to go next. You can take a component that started in Teams chat, maybe between the three of us. We have some ideas, we've pulled it together, we've messed with it a bit, we've got something that we think has promise, and now we can take that component and put it into an email, for example, share it with a broader audience of stakeholders. And if we've got more ideas that we came up with after the email went out, we just go ahead and add it right in that Teams chat. And no matter whether someone opens that email the minute we send it or 10 minutes down the road or 10 hours or 3 days, they're always going to see the latest. That's really a really big part of what we think the power of Loop components and the Loop ecosystem is, that single source of truth that is always up to date whenever you interact with it.
Right. And I'd imagine, the more we get into kind of all of the stuff we've been doing since Teams, like being able to engage people, throughout all of the applications of Viva, many of which are SharePoint pages with news, those just become further places to extend those experiences over time, right?
Yeah, we're excited to bring Loop components and the rest of the Loop ecosystem to the rest of Microsoft 365. The area we're focused on right now to start is bringing it into those communication experiences. So that Teams experience, the ability to go into Teams today, look for that Loop icon underneath your message compose box and add a component right there. That's where we're starting. That experience is going to be brought to Outlook in the near future, and we've also teased how this is going to be integrated with the Teams meeting experience and OneNote meeting notes in the near future. Eventually, we want to bring it to experiences as varied as Whiteboard, where we know teams are doing lots of more visual relational collaboration on that infinite 2D canvas. We want to bring it into Word so that you can take the ideas that start in Teams or in Outlook and then grow into a document that you maybe need to formalize and share with a broader audience of stakeholders. But eventually, yes, like we see this technology and these components as spreading everywhere in the M365 ecosystem so that you can collaborate wherever it makes sense for you and your team to do so.
Greg, I want to take the newbie hat from Chris and just wear it for a second. Of the things that I know, you've kind of already described a few different types of loops. I know Chris mentioned one around voting. Do you mind just enumerating? It might just be, as imagine if somebody clicked the loop icon in a chat and the pop-up of the potential what you can do, and just frame it around a couple of scenarios, maybe even just describing some of the choices that you can make so that people can understand the types of loop components that they can create for doing certain different tasks or scenarios.
Yeah. So I mentioned that if you're in Teams, in Teams for Work, if you look under your Message Compose box in the chat experience, you're going to see a new icon right down there close to the paperclip and the emojis and whatnot that you're used to using. And that is the loop icon. And if you click that, you'll get a selection of components that you can insert into the thread. Now, to take an example, the way things often work today is a team or a small work group that's making a tough decision. You might kick off a chat or an email to talk with your colleagues and figure out a path forward. If you've got an impending deadline, there's never enough time. If you try to meet on short notice, it's inevitably going to add tension and it risks leaving people out of the discussion. Conversations like this can also frequently play out as lengthy email discussions with lots of confusing inline replies or Teams chats that become, I dare say it, impossible for anyone arriving late to catch up on. And this comes back to that world of hybrid work that we were talking about. It's not just the danger in making sense of the crosstalk. It's that for many folks, this is an intimidating environment in which to share an idea. And rarely do all of the ideas get the consideration they deserve. Folks will often bias to the earliest ideas in the conversation. And once things get rolling in a certain direction, it's really hard to unwind that. So if you imagine doing this scenario instead with a component like our voting table, which actually isn't out just yet, but it's coming pretty soon, a voting table offers a collaboration-friendly canvas right inside the Teams chat. So you go to that icon, you select voting table, you insert it into the chat, and what you get is a live, embedded, editable, real-time component that anyone can type into. You can add your idea, you can list out the pros and cons of tackling the challenge your team is facing, and as more ideas get added simultaneously by all the participants in the conversation, or as folks come along and add their ideas asynchronously, later in the day, or perhaps they're on this other side of the globe and they need to add it while you're asleep, you have the opportunity then to go and to vote on the ideas that you think hold the most promise. See which ones are resonating the best with the team. Now, again, sort of in the old world, what would happen is after a long Teams chat or after a lengthy email back and forth, someone has to step up and collate all the ideas, summarize the team's thinking so far. There's enormous, power of the pen. If they have an idea that they like best, they might sort of nudge it in that direction. But with a loop component, the best part is all that work is already done. The work speaks for itself. You get to see where the team's energy is, what ideas are resonating best, and then sharing that work in progress is easy. You go to the top right corner of that loop component in the Teams chat, you hit the copy button, you paste it into your Outlook email, maybe add some context if you'd like. Hey, we're in the early stages of this. We've done some thinking. We'd really like more opinions on what direction we should go. If you have other ideas, please add them. And then you hit send. And because these loop components are designed to move freely between apps in the M365 ecosystem, the team's work is available inline in this live connected canvas for both the folks in Outlook and those who are still brainstorming in Teams. And, if new suggestions roll in as, a whole new bunch of replies, you don't have to merge and collate them. All of the ideas show up instantly for all of the stakeholders across both of those apps and experiences and wherever else you might take the component.
And I think that's where, as an end user, you would see the 4-leaf clover, because it truly is magic. Just to see something come alive. I think sometimes even just watching these demos, my favorite is when the person on stage is not doing anything, but you see all the typing and all the activity going on. But really, truly, that outreach of wanting to collect ideas and people putting them into that, like you said, single source of truth that then remains and grows as you need it. It's that dynamic nature of it. It really is an adaptment to how people are working more and more these days. And it gives them the ability to do it. So maybe they want to then, work a little bit more, like you said, asynchronously. There's no hard requirement and there's no real barrier to entry. It really is easy to engage with a loop.
Yeah, and that's what we've heard from our customers is it can be a really viral experience. It's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around sometimes as you first get into it, but then like you said, Mark, you see it live and in action. There's no barrier to entry. You just start typing. You see those presence cursors moving around. You see people typing into the table. You see that collaboration come alive. It does require a little bit of a mental shift. We hear from some folks, oh wow, like this is a real change from the world in which I spend a lot of time polishing my content before getting it out there in the world. But we know from all of the user research that we've done that this can actually be a relief to not have to polish things to a gleam before sharing with your colleagues and your coworkers and getting feedback on it, so that you spend all of your energy picking the right ideas to move forward with. And then absolutely, like this doesn't replace Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. There is always going to be a need to take your collaboration, because collaboration can be messy sometime. We embrace the messiness on our team, but to take that and to transform it into an artifact that might be appropriate for sharing up to leadership or sharing with external partners and customers. We view Loop as both the seed from which that collaborative experience starts, and it can be taken to one of the other Microsoft apps for refinement and publishing. But we also think that there are many teams out there, teams who are open to this new way of working and really embrace the collaborative nature of it, where they're going to do all of their work in Loop, and they're going to live in that Loop app. They're going to compile all of that thinking live in real time and in a really open way in the workspace, so that the pages become the reflection of everything that they've accomplished together in a teams, a reflection of the decisions that they've made, and all of that is shareable wherever it needs to be shared.
So that's one example. I know when you click that loop icon and you kind of have the breadth of what you can do is to add a new component to a chat or something like that. Do you mind just walking through a couple others that they'll see when they pop open that loop icon?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I find folks on my team use a lot is if you're trying to find the right words for something, maybe it's a little blurb for a help article, or you're trying to wordsmith that intro to a presentation, you can just add a paragraph right there. And rather than needing to spool up a whole document to work together on that teaser for a presentation or a training session, you can take a stab at it, make a draft, and then see how others respond to it. And they can make their edits in line. Attribution is available within the component, so you can keep track of who added what and where ideas came from. And of course, you still got that version history if you want to roll back and take a look at an earlier version of something that you made together. The table component has been really powerful. There's something sort of naturally collaborative about giving everyone a row or a column in the table. You might send your table out to the team describing data that you need, and then using an @ mention to pull in the person who you need to provide that data. You could use it for a simple sign-up sheet, or even for more intensive project management tasks as a way to keep track of who's assigned to each work item, what the due date is, and offering space for commentary on how things are going and where folks need help to be unblocked. We're actually introducing a formal status tracker component that's going to ship later in the year as a means of making it even easier to collect and organize updates. And we've got some cool capabilities out there on the horizon for ways to take tabular content and pivot it in interesting and useful ways. But what's really great about it is, this has the opportunity to improve or even replace the morning stand-ups that some teams have. Instead of waiting patiently for your colleagues to take their turn to talk through what they're working on, everyone can share their status asynchronously, and then you can use that meeting time to dive deeper into the areas where you really need to work together. If folks need to prioritize focus time instead, or maybe even family commitments over that team meeting, no one misses out. And with Loop, we really think that there are going to be teams who go well beyond that to embrace components as the principal tool for status tracking and reporting out on status. Status that's always up to date, no matter whether you're looking at that email again at the moment that arrives or you get back to it weeks later.
So, Craig, I think there's a couple of ways where, you're, I think, challenging people to imagine something more. And so one thing, hopefully we could share an image of in the show notes is what that interactive experience looks like in those tables. That if you've got multiple people in there, they're all represented by different colors and different arrows and different monograms, so you can kind of see everyone working together instead of just discovering it as things change. What I think is, I think that's a really great way of pushing the interface paradigm. There's a couple of places I know that you're looking to integrate these patterns to some other parts of the Microsoft experience, thinking about, Dynamics and some of those other areas. Could you talk about those a bit?
Yeah, well, two of the scenarios that we showed off back at Ignite are meetings, and you mentioned also that Dynamics experience. So with meetings, even today, with the capabilities that we have in Teams right now, you can add a checklist, and it's really, really popular among my colleagues to sort of use that to crowdsource and even democratize gathering topics for an upcoming meeting. The world of hybrid work is not a world without meetings, but we do want to make sure those meetings are used as productively as possible. And there's no better way to do that than to get folks contributing the topics that are top of mind for them and most important to them in the moment. Now, that experience of sending out a checklist and using that to figure out what should go into a meeting is sort of a simple version of this. It's very approachable. Our research has shown it to be far more engaging than sending out a poll or sending out a traditional document asking for these suggestions. But we also at Ignite offered this preview of a full-blown meeting notes experience, an integrated solution across Teams, Outlook, and OneNote that gives everyone a space to collaborate not only on the agenda, but to take collaborative meeting notes and also track action items and follow-ups from the meeting. It's great to go back and check out those materials, or maybe we can include an image of it. But having a pane next to the meeting where you see folks typing live the topics of conversation and what decisions are being made and what follow-ups are being extracted from your time together, that precious synchronous time when you and the whole team are on a call together, it just, it goes miles to making for a more collaborative and productive experience where you really understand what folks are walking away from, as opposed to having meetings that, sort of happen because they're on the calendar and then you walk away from it and you're not quite sure what happened. So we're really excited about the future of meeting notes, which is powered by some of that same Loop technology, that collaborative canvas that you see in these Loop components. You mentioned also Dynamics, and this was another thing that we're really excited about because it shows how you bring business processes and live data into the conversations that you're having in chats, channels, and meetings. The scenario that we showed off at Ignite, I think, is a really great one because it shows the power of Microsoft Loop combined with our work on Editor with Context IQ, which is our ability to call upon collaboration and business artifacts from within these communications and other experiences using, for example, the @ symbol. So in the demo that we showed off at Ignite, we've got a sales team working to close a customer opportunity. They're discussing it in Teams chat, and they use Editor with Context IQ to pull in related Loop components for the Dynamics 365 sales opportunity record. They can also pull in content not just from Dynamics, but in a future where we've broadened our third-party partnerships, as we really are excited to do. You can imagine pulling in these records not just from a Microsoft product like Dynamics, but also from Jira or SAP. In this example, they've inserted the opportunity record. It seamlessly pulls customer content from Dynamics 365 into the chat. And your business data is right there in the flow of work. Mark, like you were saying, it seems like magic almost, but this is the power of AI combined with these Loop components that roam across the Microsoft 365 experience. If somebody needs to make an update, change the estimated revenue or the status, they can do it from right within the chat. They don't need to go out to the browser, go out to Dynamics 365 to make those updates. So it really does maintain that single source of truth that keeps everyone in sync. And at the same time, your data is always safe. Again, this is OneDrive, this is SharePoint. Only those with proper access permissions will see the content. And no matter where folks are working with the data, it's always going to reflect the latest from across the entire ecosystem. So scenarios like this cut out a lot of manual steps to copy information around. You don't get stale information that ends up confusing folks. And Editor is just going to be fantastic at making these predictive suggestions that bring that content you need right to your fingertips, no matter where you are.
That is what I would say a wonderfully rich roadmap. I saw a lot of the demos that you referred to as far as, reaching beyond kind of the lists and tables, but moving into meeting notes, paragraphs, obviously the Dynamics 365, it really does bring in that blend of content that exists and probably isn't what you're going to change collaboratively, but it references and puts it in line with where that collaborative work or that conversation is. And of course, there are going to be a lot of content types and sources that people are going to want or will make available, and that just makes sense for the blend of how people work, where the information sits, whether it's definitive content or if it's that collaborative that you're adding to the context. It's a super exciting, future just by nature of, it's a large announcement for Microsoft just to make in the sense of a new app or a new way of working. But at the same time, it rests and resides in a space that I think from an IT perspective, they can feel comfortable with how it works, the training regimen of getting people up to speed and how to do these things. These are, going to be similar to what they've done maybe in other technologies, just better or closer to home. And besides, we'll put a link in the show notes where people can go learn more. There's a great website that launched at Ignite. I really enjoyed just seeing the visuals that Chris described, of like, okay, it isn't just this fancy polished video. It really is bringing the UI to a new level and seeing that in reality of being able to use it now. Do you want to just give that 101? Like, what should people do today? We'll have the link to learn more. What's that one thing that people can try today that you would encourage them just to try Loop for the first time?
Yeah, the best thing you can do right now is hop on over into Teams and hit that loop icon under the Teams Compose box. Try it out with a friend, see what it's like. I think really the experience speaks for itself, and we would love to hear more about the scenarios that resonate with you, what your team finds value in. It's something that it's definitely a new way of working, and so we're excited to see what the community comes up with in terms of how that's really changing how hybrid work gets done across the world. If you want to learn more about Microsoft Loop and Loop components, and also the Fluid framework, our open source framework that powers some of these experiences, you can check out our Ignite sessions and documentation. The vision, including that fancy video that gets folks excited about the future here, that's available at aka.ms/loop. You can also search for Loop components on support.microsoft.com and also docs.microsoft.com for you administrators out there. That's going to give you more information on what exactly this is and how it works, how you support it, what you should try first, all sorts of good stuff like that. And I do also want to say we teased a little bit the third-party developer story. Folks, we want folks to be getting excited about how they can bring their applications experiences into the Loop ecosystem. The great news is that this is all about extending existing message extension apps and graph connector integrations with minimal investment. And we'll be sharing more on the specific details of that at our developer conference build just coming up in May. So lots of great information that's out there. Please don't hesitate to give us feedback. You can do that by going to the corner of your Teams app and giving feedback. Make sure to include that word loop. And then you could also, again, find these components in office.com. Every loop component you add, you can pop out into the browser if you want a bit more space to work with. And there's a feedback loop there in the lower corner as well. We love to hear what you're thinking, how you're using it, and all your thoughts on these experiences.
Excellent. Greg, we want to thank you for bringing us all into the loop. Obviously, we are now more up to speed, both Chris and I, but also selfishly through to our audience, who we hope got a lot around what is Loop and what is it today and where we're going. But thank you for working on this technology. Thank you for your time on the Interzone. And I hope this fruitful roadmap that you've got for yourself will keep you nice and busy.
Absolutely. We've got lots in the store. Can't wait to show you what's coming next. Hopefully, we'll talk more then.
So up next on the Intrazone, events. As we are seeing the world light up with events, not just like the Microsoft 365 conference, but dozens and dozens of events happening both online and out there in the real world, we love to spotlight those here on the Intrazone. And the first one we have coming up is the AIM conference. Microsoft is an elite diamond sponsor, which sounds very fancy. I'll be keynoting at that event. It is coming up April 27th to 29th in Denver, Colorado. There'll be a pretty large group coming from the Microsoft product teams. And if you are interested in joining us there, please visit our blog. We'll include that in the show notes. I would love to be able to engage you there.
AIM is going to be a fun show for you, Chris. And I know that is from the teasing that we were doing in the intro, one of the things that's keeping you busy in the in-between right now. So I wish you luck as that comes up. Next up for events is the SEF 2022. This is an event that was planned to be in person, and it still will be in person, but some of the sessions will be delivered virtually. This is to take place in Sweden on May 4th to the 5th. And some of the people that are dialing in virtually from the U.S. are myself, Naomi Moneypenny, Dan Holm, Rebecca Isaacson, who will be local, will be driving one of the keynotes, and James Eccles. So SEF 2022, if you're in Sweden in person, and if you're there, expect to see some of us logging in from the virtual space.
And if you want to run 24 hours a day between SEF and other events, there's another event happening the same week, and that is the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. That'll be held entirely online May 4th through 6th. So it's a 3-day event happening online, covering the broad range of M365 solutions, Teams, SharePoint, all of Viva and everything else that we have across the suite.
Yeah, I ran into Joel Olson, who's one of our community peers and ex-Microsofty, and he's helping manage and run the virtual marathon, and it looks like he is lacing up his shoes for a pretty sizable event. So I can't wait to share more details about that. The next event is here locally for us that are in the Pacific Northwest. It is the 365 EduCon Seattle. That's from May 9th through the 12th. And like I mentioned, in Seattle at the Convention Center, there are a couple of days of workshops. There is a keynote with Jeff Teeper, and we're just getting that underway as far as planning. And we're looking at a ton of breakout sessions. A lot of them are delivered by the community and MVPs, and we'll have a good handful of Microsoft-led sessions as well. And we are here to save you a little bit of money. So if you use the code Cashman, my last name, uppercase, Kashman, you will save $100. So we hope to see you there. Register today, get involved, and also just a little plug for Chris and I. I am doing a Microsoft Lists workshop in one of the pre-days, and Chris is leading a workshop on Viva Topics. Chris, any little nuggets you want to share about the Viva Topics workshop?
Bring your laptop. We'll definitely do some hands-on work. You'll get to build out a couple of topic pages, and we'll have prizes for the people who create the best.
Excellent. And it's always a great experience, certainly, to hear feedback so we can alter things as we go. This one's been delivered a couple times, so I think you'll really like that topics workshop. Chris, I'm going to let you do this last one because it's just an exciting announcement of a date. We now have a date.
Yeah, we do have a date coming up for Build, one of Microsoft's primary conferences focused on developer stories, extensibility, all the ways that you can code things with our platform, and a future look at capabilities that are coming to Azure, Power, M365, and the rest. That is coming up May 24th to 26th. It is online, it is free, and it is virtual. Of course, as the year progresses, we expect to see even more great events coming to the calendar. So if there's an event that you know about that you'd like to feature on an upcoming episode of the Intrazone, please write to us, and we'd love to take care of it here.
We want to thank our guest, Greg Howard, for being on the show and for kicking off such exciting new technology, going from the Fluid framework to Loop. There it is.
Oh, yeah, I knew you were going to do that.
I had to once, right?
We also encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. You can visit us at aka.ms/theintrazone.
Send us your questions and feedback for the SharePoint teams. We'll even pass it along to the Loop team if you have any Loop feedback. You can reach us via email at theinterzone@microsoft.com, or via Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for listening. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and this has been The Interzone, a show about the Microsoft 365 componentized intelligent intranet.